Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock, and so very happy to have with me today. And I'm gonna say her beautiful name, Chanchal Garg, speaker, executive coach, and facilitator at the Stanford Graduate Business School, and author of Unearthed: The Lies We Carry and the Truths They Bury. So thank you so much for being here, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Terry. I'm delighted.
Yeah. Well, I told you I'm just a fan, one, because you've put your truth out there. And man, have we talked about that a lot on this show over the last 8 years of how important it is to put our truths out there. So can you talk to folks about what inspired you to write Unearthed?
Yeah. Um, it when I went through all of these experiences and it's been a long time, right? And then when I finally realized what I had actually been through and also had started to experience some of the healing, it was almost as if I looked at that journey and I was like, it can't just be it can't just be this, right? And so I looked at it and, I'm a coach, I'm an executive coach. I work with women a lot. And I was starting to hear the same underlying issues from women all over. And so while I know my story is extreme, I think there are so many universal themes in it. And I think one of the biggest gifts that I had as I was healing was to recognize that I'm not alone in how I'm feeling, in the experiences that I'm having, like in all of that, like sort of under the radar dialogue that I'm having with myself. I'm not alone in that, right? Like we're all having our own version of it. So that was one. And then beyond that, it was my kids, right? I have a son and a daughter, a 13-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. I've watched my entire maternal female lineage be silent with whatever they've been experiencing. I've been wanting to break that cycle. I don't want my own children to deal with it. Um, and in some spiritual way, I hope to free my ancestors too, you know? So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I love that. And it's so beautiful. And I've been doing, gosh, the same similar work and trying to be the one that stops the cycle. And
Yeah.
yeah, my kids have certainly been my inspiration, but I've done that ancestral healing work too. And I'm hoping that that's the case, is that for
Yeah.
my grandmother who was quiet, or my mom, like my mom was an alcoholic, and again, talked about a lot on this show, and we went on a wonderful healing journey together. But she, in her 80s, like I want to say 82, finally, me standing at the foot of her hospital bed, sobbing my eyes out and being like, Mom, it's time you deal with your childhood trauma. Like, it's you have to deal with it,
Yeah.
instead of diving into this bottle of vodka. And she set it free. Stuff that I had no idea that she had been through. And she started to do her healing work in her 80s. So yeah, I love that you're doing that work, but that ancestral work as well. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like somebody has to do it, right? At some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. But what an inspiration for, your kids to be like, oh, mom's doing this hard work. Um, yeah, I tell my kids they're ahead of the game because, they'll do some of these healing stuff that I've talked about, or I'm like, oh my gosh, you've been paying attention.
Yes. And that's the thing, right? Like we started and they continue it, right? Because I'm always telling them, like, you're going to grow up and you're going to be like, why did we do this thing? And I never want you to get stuck in this idea that it's tradition or it's the way it's been or whatever. I want you to feel free to make the changes that you need to evolve it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, it sounds like that's what is happening on your end too. And I
Yeah.
love that, like just as a generation, I feel like
Yeah.
it's the work we get to do.
For sure. Now you brought up the word tradition, and I know that's been a big part of your story.
Yeah.
Is so you want to talk to folks about, like, you broke tradition, and I guess those expectations in your tradition.
Yeah, many times. I was raised to be very, very traditional. Even though I was born in Louisiana, right? I always say that I was born in Baton Rouge or Punjab, Louisiana, I tell people, because my parents raised me as if I was born in 1970s India. And, it's interesting because that form of India doesn't even exist anymore, right? Like even India has moved on, but just because that's their memory and they want to hold on to their tradition and culture, which I get, that's sort of the environment I was raised in. But yeah, so I was always very dedicated to my culture. Um, I was raised to want to be a good wife, right? Want to find a husband, want to be a good wife, live by these traditional Indian values. And, I bought into it a lot because that's where I got belonging. That's where I got love when I stuck to those beliefs, when I asked questions even that were aligned with those beliefs, that's when I got acceptance and love. And so, as a child, I didn't know any better. And I continued to fall in that line. And over time, what I realized, in the book, I talk about my first marriage, which was quite abusive. Um, and I started to realize, like, oh, like these values where I thought I was going to get love are actually sort of biting me in the butt now, right? And it's when I started to question things. And I mean, and along the way, there were times where I questioned because I was always trying to find my own sense of self, right? Like there's this definition of what it means to be a good Indian girl. And then there's also sort of this projection from my family, at least, of what it means to be Western or American. And those two narratives could never merge, right? And I was sitting here really loving my own heritage, but at the same time, wanting to find my place in America and wanting to be both, right? Finding my own identity. And, I talk about this many times. It felt like every step of the way, I either had to choose or somebody else chose for me, who I was. And so it took a lot, and it took a lot of repetition for me to finally take a stand and say, no, I'm going to make my own choices. And I did it once, and it's like, I was like, oh, like in my first marriage, I left the marriage and I'm like, okay, I took the step. It was a big thing and I'm free. And then I found myself in my next situation, right? And I had to do it all over again. And then I broke myself free of that. And I know it was next situation. So it's like it builds. And even now, I I look at my life and it's night and day from where it was even 10 years ago. And at the same time, like to think that maybe I'm done with the work that I'm doing is ridiculous, right? Because
Yeah.
it just keeps building. It keeps building.
And that's
Yeah.
so true. Oh my gosh. And I know I've talked about it in that I was like, okay, like I've reached this healing place and oh, everything is good. And then the next thing came along and I was like, oh, I'm so not done.
Right.
There's the next step. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now
Sometimes I'm
you
just like, it
go
would be
ahead.
nice to have a break, but
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I've had that conversation.
yes.
Been like, come on.
Hello. Yes.
Now you had I know for me like my first marriage I reached the point where standing at the bottom of a staircase having someone this far from my face and being very unpleasant, and I just put my hand up and said I'm done, and that was
Yeah.
my aha moment. But I know you had an aha moment, what, in a yoga class? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, can you talk about like what was that shift? Like where did you go from taking it and
Yeah.
tolerating it, I guess, living with it, to saying no more?
Yep. Well, in the Indian culture, we're taught, and it's a belief I have, that we are not our body, right? And I believe that, right? We're beyond that.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think that belief taken too far can mean we start to ignore the signals our body's giving. And I learned that because there were so many times where I tried to speak up as a child and I was, shut down or ignored or whatever, or discounted. And so I stopped believing my body. When I really started to practice yoga, um, I started inhabiting my body again. And as I started to do that, it was like I couldn't ignore it. I used to say, like, being able to move my pinky toe on command is more than just a party trick, right? It's about inhabiting every inch of my body. And so I was teaching a yoga class, and it was my own studio at the time. I was pregnant with my daughter. So she also had started to have a voice, like they start kicking and giving you all these signals of what they
Yeah.
like and don't like. And during this class, it's almost like I wasn't teaching it the way I normally teach my classes. Like the message I was giving people, I was like, is your practice really serving you? or are you serving your practice, right? Like it was kind of like, are you doing this for your ego, or are you doing this to really get in touch with yourself, right? And that was sort of the question. Um, and I was saying things like, if your practice isn't serving you, maybe you need to find a new practice. Maybe you need to like question yourself, question what you're doing. And after that class, I was like, oh, that was really different, you know? And so I walked into the bathroom at my studio and I looked in the mirror and I had to ask myself, I'm like, is your practice serving you? And I had this big aha moment. And it was almost as if I don't even know how to explain it other than just like a knowing, right? But I knew in that moment that something was shifting. And it also felt like the voice of my daughter. Like,
Oh,
I'm not going to deal with this. You need to clean this up before I get here.
oh,
No. And she is this child is a very powerful woman or girl right now,
yeah,
coming into womanhood. But I really do feel like, there was some part of an agreement somewhere
yeah.
where she came to wake me up.
Oh, I totally believe in that. And somebody had told me once, we choose our parents before we get here. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, she had chosen you. And you're right. I mean, that's so cool to think. I mean, I always call those little nudges angel whispers myself, but your
Yeah.
your daughter was like, "Hey,
Yeah.
hold up a second." Oh, that's really awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. So then did you end up closing that practice or did you
So
transition out of it?
I kept the studio for a little while longer, but it wasn't like the practice wasn't necessarily revolving around the guru. Um, but I did, it took me a while, but I left the guru. I told my parents they didn't get it at first, unfortunately. Um, so I had to walk alone for quite a while. It took me 2 years to tell my husband. Um, he had a really hard time processing it as well. But over time, I think in hindsight now, when I look back, I almost feel like maybe it was a good thing that they didn't get it
Yeah,
because it forced me to rely on myself. It forced me to recognize like I have what I need inside of me. And that was like, those are words that I can say. And sometimes even now I feel like I just say them flippantly, but to really be able to believe that and to move through life knowing that is a
yeah,
different story.
yeah,
Um, and so I feel like that was the starting point of me really embracing that. And it's a lesson that, I continue to learn over and over and over again every day.
yeah. And again, it's so empowering to for yourself to recognize that now and say, oh, I had it in me. Like we all do, right? We all
Yeah.
have it in us.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
100%.
yeah, yeah, fascinating. And just as a little FYI side note, so I had an aha moment in a yoga class. Um, it was just as I had first stepped onto the healing path, and I was doing a yoga class in a gym. And so it
Mhm.
was, and so we had to lie at the end on our flat on our backs. And it was a matter of like coming into our breath, right? And being like and just being with our breath. And in that stillness, I hadn't had a panic attack in years because I had started doing this healing work. And the overwhelming because be, I had spent so much time dissociated from myself,
Yeah.
disconnected from myself, that when I came into my body, I was so scared to be inside myself. Like I was
Mhm.
so scared that I started to feel this anxiety that I was like, oh no, I need to be outside of me. Like I don't need to be inside there. That's scary. And I ended up like crawling to a corner and just sitting in the corner, like, holy moly, where is that coming from? But it
Mhm.
helped me recognize, oh, I need to learn to be inside of me and be comfortable
Yeah.
with all of these scary sensations. So, yeah, it can be a very powerful practice for so many reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it, it's it's a practice where we're forced to meet our emotions and all of the sensations, like not distract from them. Like it's easy to like put on some music and get on the treadmill or do whatever, right? And yoga is one of those things. It's like, yes, there's the physical, but it's meeting you like in your wholeness. And so it's such a powerful practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Shoot, I had another question for you and it popped out of my brain. And so, well, let's take a little bit of a left turn. So, in your
Yeah.
coaching business, do you work with you do executive coaching, right? So is it just women and like women's empowerment that you do?
Yeah, no, great question. No, I work with all folks. Um, right now from the book, I'm really looking to work with more women, to be honest, and I have been even over the past couple of years. There's a power matrix that I've sort of developed from my own journey of healing. It's called the Unearthed Power Matrix. It's basically a triangle with identity sitting at the top and language and embodiment as the two corners at the bottom. And the premise is basically that our identity is not something that's set, right? It's the sum of our lived experience, and we sort of get to choose what we want to embody and use as our identity, right? So it doesn't have to be something that's chosen for us or anything that's set in stone. It's really a choice, and we get to use our language and embodiment to bring that out in the world in terms of how we show up. And what I have found, just because my most of my career has been in leadership development, and while I think this is very true for women, I think it's true for a lot of people, not just women, um, is that we're always, not always, but I think oftentimes we're overcompensating or making ourselves small because of these messages that we received when we were younger, right? In terms of how we need to show up or what constitutes a good person or a good leader or a good this or a good that. And I think that oftentimes we've learned how to show up in a way that is productive and that gives us what we need to in our careers. But in that process, there's a part of ourselves that we end up betraying and leave behind. And so, what I'm hoping to do in my work with leadership is help people to not just show up powerfully, but be able to show up powerfully without leaving themselves behind.
Yes. And so needed, so very needed. I know, again, when I started sharing my truths, gosh, I was in my 40s, and how many people reached out to me and said, like, how empowered they started to feel because I was standing in my truth, like honoring
Mhm.
who I really was. And so, yeah, what a gift that is to folks to be able to I could, guide them to be able to do that. And yeah, it's
Yeah,
just so
I
empowering.
love what you just said. It's so true, right? Like one of us steps up and it's kind of like there's a rise, of people around you. And I think when everybody does that, there's a ripple effect. And so it's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Um, the other question that popped in my head, and it's kind of backtracking a little bit, but do you share in your book and when you talk on podcasts and share in even in your coaching practice, do you share your truths and like what happened to you and do you find like I know some people will be like, oh, I had some bad things happen. They don't really go into the
Mm,
details of it. But a lot of times, like me, like I'm that person that's just like, "Bleh."
yeah.
Like I put it all out there, right? But again, because I've found that just people come then and say, and what's fascinating to me is how many people, because I started on Facebook, like that's where I started doing like putting my little pieces out there, right? And
Yeah.
but then I would get private messages or I would get text messages. It was almost like behind the scenes. They'd be like, oh my gosh, me too. Oh my
Mm,
gosh. And so again, that's why again I applaud you for putting your book out there and the work you do because
thank you.
people connect, they resonate with it, and they don't feel so all alone, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. So
Yeah.
does your book go into the nitty-gritty of your story?
Yeah, I mean, the book is my entire story, right?
Okay.
From start. It's like, how I was raised and the actual abuse that happened and all of the healing experiences that have transpired since. So it's really all of that. And then the work that I do as a coach is sort of taking that and saying, okay, how do we take like this very extreme experience and extract sort of the universal lessons from it and apply it, right? So yeah, it's all in there. In coaching sessions specifically, I don't necessarily, I mean, there have been a couple of times maybe when I've gotten into my story. But I guess my concern is always like I never want people to feel like I'm projecting onto
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of what my experience is. I think everybody has their own unique experience and their own response to trauma in a lot of ways. And so um, I try to be discerning in that way. And you know, I really relate to what you're saying because there is so much power in naming your truth and naming the specifics because it does help people to not feel alone and it gives them permission to say, me too, right? And it gives them permission to like actually name the thing. It can be really scary to name it,
Yeah.
really scary. And when someone else has done it first, it just it makes it easier.
Yeah.
So
And that's
yeah,
why I found it so fascinating that they weren't feeling empowered enough yet to be like
yeah,
me too to the world, right?
right.
But that me too privately. And so again, I just think it's amazing that you do put your story out there in your book. So that's just like everybody go buy the book. Um, so because again, like that's where you start to see these things and you go, oh my gosh, like someone else and it may not be the exact same
Right.
story, but I've always told people trauma is trauma, pain is pain. It's
Mhm.
if it's hurt you, um, then gosh, you are so worthy of, we're all worthy of that
Yeah.
peace and joy that can come from healing.
100%. And I
Yeah.
find myself, you know, I can read stories that are not anywhere near mine, but they're, like you said, there's pain and there's these feelings of a worth or lack of worth. And no matter what that is, like I can always feel myself in that story somehow,
Yeah.
right? So yeah,
Yeah. Well, when
absolutely.
you were talking about growing up in Indian family and tradition,
Yeah.
like I instantly thought, oh my gosh, well, growing up, Irish German Catholic, like I was like, goodness gracious. You talk about expectations. My dad was a Jesuit brother in the seminary for 8 years
Wow.
before leaving to marry my mom. My mom wanted to be a nun. So it was like, yeah, like so I was resonating. It's nothing like what you grew up with, but I was still like just like nodding my head and like, oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm realizing that more and more. Like, I think this is such a universal story, especially for women, right? Like, just this idea of what constitutes a good, and you know, I shouldn't even say that anymore because I think it's the same for men. I think we're all sort of suffering under this paradigm that we're in.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
remember as a teenager sitting in church and my dad sitting next to me and they'd be doing some reading and it would talk about, like women being subservient to men and some
yeah,
biblical reading. And I'd be like, I would literally sigh out loud and my dad would, give me an elbow and I'd be like, seriously, Dad, like I'm whispering in church, and he's like, not now, Now afterwards we'd have a deep conversation, but I'd just be like, are you kidding me?
yeah.
But I was starting to figure out my voice then, like,
I love
no
that.
way.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the flame had already been lit.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I certainly, again, I'm so happy you're here and sharing your truths and thank you for the work you're doing. Is there any final thoughts that you want to leave folks with or anything that you wanted to touch upon that we didn't get a chance to talk about yet?
Um, well, you know, the book comes out June 2nd. You know, I think the thing that I want people to get from it more than anything else is sort of what we were talking about earlier, just this idea that you really do. Everybody has what they need inside of them. They don't need to look for it externally. So yeah, like I hope people enjoy the book. I've also on my website, I've created sort of this little quiz for folks to take where they can sort of get their growth edges in language, embodiment, and identity. And it just sort of sends after people take it, it sends emails on with resources and things like that of what folks can sort of do in their own practices and things to strengthen that or to actually make a choice to say like, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? And things like that. So, you know, if you get a chance and want to check that out, that would be great as well.
Wonderful. And
Yeah,
so what is your website so they can go check that out?
sure. It's chanchalgarg.com. So ChanchalGarg.com.
Awesome. Awesome. All
Yeah.
right. Well, again, it's just been a pleasure to have you here. Again, thank you for the work you do and sharing your insights. And yeah, I'm excited to read your book.
Thank you so much, Terry. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock here. Just wanted to thank you again for being a part of this healing space and my hashtag hope for healing journey. Thank you for sharing, liking, inviting others to join, listening in. You've really helped this show blossom. It has now been downloaded in 136 countries and is in the top 2% globally out of 3.2 million shows, which is just amazing. And it's all because of you and your tuning in and inviting others and sharing and liking and loving. And your reviews on Apple really help too. My goal is to hit 100 5-star reviews by the end of the year. And I am closing in on that. So if you are listening in on Apple or Apple Podcasts, please go and rate the show and leave a review if you absolutely love it. And I would be most appreciative. Also, if you would like to receive my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, please be sure to go to teriwellbrock.com. It's Teri, just one R, WELLBROCK.com. And I have a gift to send you for signing up for that monthly Hope for Healing newsletter. Plus, there are many other resources listed on that page, including a resource library. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.